I'm Jen Handy, the Associate Director here at SHEP. On this episode of SHEP Talks, I had the opportunity to sit down with Kailee Brickner-McDonald, Director of Middlebury's Center for Community Engagement, and Sarah Stroup, Professor of Political Science and the Director of Middlebury's Davis Collaborative in Conflict Transformation. We talked about the work happening at the Davis Collaborative and, more broadly, about their vision to embed principles and practices of conflict transformation in the liberal arts from high school to graduate school. This is our second episode focused on conflict transformation. To learn more about conflict transformation, what it is, and how it differs from conflict resolution, be sure to check out our recent episode with Manchester's Professor Katie Gray-Brown. I hope you enjoy. Thank you, Kailee and Sarah, for being here today. Middlebury has made a commitment to serve as an incubator for research, teaching, and student experiences to address divisiveness in society. As part of this commitment, you've created the Davis Collaborative in Conflict Transformation. Can you tell me a little bit about the collaborative and the larger vision for the work happening through that collaborative?
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Jen, for the invitation to be part of the SHEP podcast. It's been wonderful to work in this partnership and learn from you all in the great work that you're doing. So conflict transformation is an approach that you all are familiar with, and hopefully your listeners have had a chance to learn a little bit about from Katie Gray-Brown and some of the other content in your series. For us, conflict transformation very simply means trying to move from more destructive versions of conflict to more constructive versions. And that is at all levels of human relationships, from the interpersonal to the organizational, to the institutional, to the global. As our colleague at the Institute in Monterey reminds us, it also can be the internal conflict, what Netta Avenari refers to as the micro level of conflict. So that's a very ambitious scope of work, even for a small liberal arts college like Middlebury. And it's been really exciting to lean into this. 2 years ago, Middlebury received the largest ever programmatic grant in Middlebury's history for this project of conflict transformation. The collaborative works in partnership with leaders throughout the global Middlebury institution to build this approach into the fabric of our work. So we're working with K through 12 teachers who go to school at the Breadloaf School of English during the summer, thinking about the power of narrative to shape social change, to build our empathy, right? To teach and write and act across difference. At the college, we are doing this work with our faculty and staff, professional development to build skills around conversations across difference. We are training students in more practices so that they can bring constructive conflict dynamics to all of their different spaces. And then in the experiential learning space that Kailee leads, putting students out into the world thoughtfully in community partnerships to think about being constructive contributors to those projects and organizations. Our fourth pillar is the graduate pillar, supporting graduate training and research. And finally, we're bringing this work into the 18 schools abroad that Middlebury helps support. So I should also say our sixth stream of work is supporting faculty research. So every year, offering new funding to college and institute faculty to do deep conflict analysis and identify new ways to transform conflict. So it's an ambitious scope. We have 7 years, $25 million, and it's been really a privilege to sit with so many partners across the global Middlebury institution to support what they already know how to do very well, but think about how we can learn from one another about what it means to apply this work with our students so that they are building both knowledge and skills to be constructive agents of change. And Kailee has more to say about what that looks like specifically in the experiential learning space.
Yeah, I think when we at SHEP first kind of heard about this work, you mentioned the scope, the impressive scope of this. It wasn't just that your scope included everything from K-12 to faculty research, kind of the scope that way, but also the commitment to collaboration. It's not just an in-house learning that you then share with the world. That collaborative element of learning with folks like us at SHEP as we build a curriculum or other settings, I think is incredibly impressive. Just the scope and the ambition. It makes us enthusiastic to kind of see people dreaming big. So I'm kind of curious what led to the big dream, right? So this is to choose this over another issue? Were there specific needs or projects that really kind of led to this being what 7 years, $25 million kind of big project and goal?
Conflict transformation is a specific area of scholarship and practice, and quite honestly, not a whole lot of folks have heard those two words together, right? And so this dream was made possible because of the work of our senior leadership, our president, working with donors and longtime supporters of Middlebury, to think about how to knit together capacities that we already had into a discrete and ambitious project that would help prepare our students to be productive citizens, meaningful partners, great employees and collaborators on their own terms in their lives in and beyond Middlebury. So that I think recognizing that conflict transformation as a framework is not the first point of reference for our partners, and entering into our conversations with a spirit of curiosity has been essential to build this very ambitious project. In experiential learning, many of our colleagues talk about civic skills and civic identity, right? Much of that work is the same as conflict transformation. It's just the language that our partners prefer to use, and we're happy to support them in doing so. At the Institute, we have a certificate in intercultural competence, learning to speak across difference when people have different norms, literally different languages sometimes, very different values. Is also part of constructive conflict, right? Of meaningful engagement across difference, where the friction that's produced is productive, right? It gets you somewhere new. So the collaborative spirit does absolutely start with meeting people where they are, understanding their level of familiarity and interest in doing this work, but also being quite invitational. So most of my meetings in the first couple of years with partners at Middlebury have started something like this. I think you do conflict transformation, even if you don't call it that. And is there a way that we can either support your work or make more space for you to do this work that you already clearly have competence in? There are, of course, also some holes that we have or some competencies that we would like to build to expand our own toolkit. But again, identifying those needs of where people want to lean into the work proceeds through that collaborative process of where are you, what would help you do your job better, and how can we help support the expansion of your own skills and knowledge in that space.
Yeah. I love that it's a mix of trying to come up with shared language, but also working with others to figure out where those holes are and how we can work together and use expertise that's some from academic and some from practitioner, and just kind of putting that on an even playing field. It feels very respectful and great. Kailee, as the director of the Center for Community Engagement, Sarah mentioned you were kind of leading the experiential learning community engagement pillar of the collaborative. That's definitely where we as SHEP fall in with that work. Can you talk a little about some of the other projects happening in that area?
Yeah, certainly. It's been such a treat to get to be part of the collaborative because it provides a new framework that I think is really helpful in connecting a lot of the different programs that both the Center for Community Engagement offers and also our colleagues in across our experiential learning centers at Middlebury College. So we also collaborate with the Center for Careers and Internships and the Innovation Hub. So together, our experiential learning centers are offering about 10 different programs for students to get practice taking these ideas of conflict transformation um, and putting them to work in our communities so that they can um, kind of test for themselves where the theory and the reality meet and where the theory and where there's more complexity or there's more challenge or maybe even where there's more flow than they might have expected. So some of the programs, certainly the SHEP collaboration is a highlight, and our students have always, or for many years, have connected through our privilege and poverty academic cluster with our national internships partner as SHEP. So students are doing internships locally as well as nationally with different human service agencies throughout Addison County here in Vermont. And the in those programs, students are able to access a lot of different conflicts. As Sarah was talking about the different levels of conflict, working in an internship for 8 weeks might be their first time having colleagues in an office-based setting. And it's also, they meet weekly within their cohort of 10 different interns who are working at different human service agencies. So there's the interpersonal and the personal, who am I? Why does this matter? Why am I choosing to do this? Work in social change areas around income inequality. That invites those kinds of conflicts. And then also the opportunities that come from working on complex social issues like housing and um, violence and restorative justice, things like that. So um, being able to think about social conflicts with more experience of what it looks like on the day-to-day level of trying to address them. So those kinds of internships that give folks a deep dive in that, in the different levels of conflict are really helpful. We also have alternative break experiences. There's 6 programs that work during the academic year with student leadership. And then there's 2 summer programs that are immersive break experiences that work internationally and domestically, called History and Translation and Service Translation. So there's immersive programs. And again, there's that interpersonal level of I'm living with 10 to 12 other students, and they're intentionally, deliberately intercultural cohorts. And then they all are addressing social issues and any kind of social issue is a conflict transformation issue, because you're addressing something like immigration and border policies, because some people want the status quo to remain and some people don't. So we're able to address complex social issues with the cohorts in that what they're engaging with, but then they also have opportunities within a cohort to have interpersonal communication and getting to stay with the discomfort that comes from things like choosing a menu and making a meal and deciding which community partners will best educate participants in an issue like environmental conservation. Which theory of change do the co-leaders want to engage with, and what partner embraces that theory of change? So there's at the co-leader level, interpersonal level, and then the systemic level is how our alternative break programs address conflict transformation. There's also, and history translation does that often with an intercultural and global scale. And that program shifts each year for what that looks like and what social issue they're addressing. This year, it's around refugee New American opportunities in the United States, with high school and college mentors and mentees, which I'm really excited about. We also have our internships through the Center for Careers and Internships. So there's a partner in South Africa named Dive. There's a partner in Uganda called Team for Tech that lead cohort-based experiences. And similar to the cohort-based alternative breaks, so you can draw some parallels for what kinds of opportunities those students have. There's also Middlebury Social Impact Core that the Innovation Hub leads, that addresses different topics in consultation with Monterey students and graduate students. And there's also our Projects for Peace program, which addresses, it supports over 90 different institutions to sponsor a project that improves the prospects for peace in the 21st century. And it's deliberately broad, so that each institution can sponsor a student or group of students to address a project for peace over the summer that has a really diverse approaches to what peace can look like. Something that I'm especially proud of that Projects for Peace and the Conflict Transformation Collaborative have worked together on is creating an alumni award for somebody who's gone through the Projects for Peace program as an undergraduate and then has sustained in the work of building peace after that experience. Our first winner last year was Joseph Kaifala, who is an educator and human rights activist from Sierra Leone, who's the director of the Center for Memory and Reparation there that addresses the Sierra Leonean Civil War and how folks can live together given that history today in Sierra Leone. And I think it's so important that students who are in a lot of these different conflict transformation experiences in their undergraduate experience for short periods of time, and they're realizing, whoa, this is hard work. And how does one choose whether to work within the system or out of the system? Or how does one maintain hope when they're suddenly realizing how entrenched the status quo is on all these different layers of complex systems? To be able to see somebody who's stayed in the work, in the discomfort, in the challenge, with the social and interpersonal barriers and conflicts that, and somebody who's made those opportunities, I think is a really exciting thing that we've been able to create with the collaborative support. So those are some of the, I think I got to all 10 programs. I didn't take a deep dive into any of them, but those are some of the ways that students can get out of the theoretical, well, stay connected to the theoretical aspects of what is conflict, and how do I understand a social issue in a nuanced way, and get to actually experience what it's like to work with others who are different than them to create a more just world.
Yeah. There are a couple of things I wrote down from what you said. I just want to dig in a little bit more because there's certain parts that I was like, this is something I was talking about yesterday, or, it's like such a
Yeah.
shared experience. One is that I'm curious if you have the same kind of experience we do. So we have students who are coming out of this coursework. So we have that similar idea of pairing the coursework and the thinking and out in life experience. And as we are preparing our interns to go into these very intense things, I have found myself being very upfront to normalize, like, this is going to be a high conflict summer. That is not a bad thing. You are going to have conflict with your roommates from all different colleges. You are going to have roommates between your expectations like at work and your colleagues' expectations, what you want to do. You are going into work with really deep intertwined issues around poverty, right? Like, this is not easy work. You're going to see structural conflicts and value conflict. This is not an easy internship. I don't think we've ever been like, you know what, this will be just kind of a breeze. You're going to go through and it's just not going to, but we've tried to normalize it. Have you found yourself kind of preparing students differently? Like, it's going to feel different. Like, the classwork is great and you're better prepared and you're going to go back better prepared to do more classwork. But are you finding yourself having similar conversations to kind of like pre-normalize it and prepare students?
That's a great question. It reminds me, in your podcast with Kailee Brickner-McDonald, you talked about how this is the experience, like, you will experience intense conflict by design. And that the intention is to, you said, to make it messy again. So yes. Being able to, well, and then something else that you all talked about was in that conversation was the power of reflection. And I think
Mhm.
that that gets to, like, so to have, I think Katie's analogy was like, you put in one drop of food coloring, it can color color your whole bowl of water, or your whole pie crust, whatever it is, icing, bowl of icing, better than water. So I think that when you're talking about, like, if students, what I'm hearing is, like, what your experience has been, that when students have some awareness that this is normal and okay and to be expected, that um, it can really help more than you'd think it would. And I'd say that's our experience as well. Because I think some students think that conflict is a failure, or
Mm.
that it's a stopping place. And to be able to prepare students and saying, here's examples of where conflict has been transformative, and how we wouldn't have gotten to this place without conflict. So look at how, while it has the potential and has the capacity to be destructive and harmful, um, it is not in and of itself necessarily those things. So yeah, I think that raising awareness and building, one of the things that I feel like we do our best work when we're doing work in cohorts, because
Mm.
then students can talk to each other and we can have those reflective conversations together, to have students sharing, what are your expectations? What are your past experiences with conflict? What has been hard about that? Where has your identity and your in your skills, where have you been able to employ those in ways that allowed you to move into that conflict and stay with that conflict? An example would be um, alternative alternative break co-leaders, who oftentimes come in as either roommates or friends. Like they design a project together and then propose it and it gets accepted, and they're leading a team together, and they might assume that because they're dear friends that they're going to be able to do this rather seamlessly. And so I feel like that's especially when students aren't expecting there to be conflict, that when all of a sudden one student starts to take the lead and make decisions without checking in with the other student, we hear from students as as advisors, I don't think I can do this anymore because it's hurting my friendship, and we just don't agree on this. So I think I have to resign or back out. Like, I don't think this is going to work. And that's through a hold up. This is where um your friendship could change because of this. But let's talk through why this is hard, how you're not alone in trying to do something difficult together, and coming up with the fact that you actually disagree on things that you just thought you were this, like, and as you might have chosen this person to be your friend or your roommate because you thought you were the same, and as you get to know them in this new way you realize they're different. And so that's like at the interpersonal level, to say that's normal, that's actually good, you're getting to know this person better, and let's sit down and actually talk about the skills you need to be able to share your experience in a way that um, isn't blaming or shaming the other person, that you can ask questions and listen to what the other person's experience is. So interpersonally, you can get to a place where then we can build on the skill from there to say, and then how do you make decisions collaboratively with somebody? So first, kind of addressing the harm where somebody feels like someone just doesn't like them anymore, which can just be hard to stay with. And then say, well, you actually need some skills to be able to make decisions together. Let's talk about those. And usually, because of the cohort thing, if one pair is dealing with that tension, a whole group of people is dealing with that tension. And if we dealt with that tension in the last year's cohort, it's likely to be in this year's cohort too. So we can kind of preempt some of those conversations and say, heads up, you're going to experience, in this example, co-lead pair tensions. And here are some ways you can set up regular structural things, like regular conversations about the process, not just the outcomes. And then here's tools for doing the things that are hard to do in collaboration. And then expand that out, think in partnering with community organizations, in interacting with community members who, again, you might think are different, you might think might be the same as you, they're actually really different. Or if you think they're so different than you, how do you have a conversation then too? So yeah, I think that preparing folks to know that it's normal and that you can sustain in it and you can move things, that it's not that conflict will be resolved and you'll like get on the other side of it and then you're a success again. It's that you can stay in conflict and it will change, and that's the expectation, that conflict is going to change based on how you engage in it, hopefully productively or through making a mistake and apologizing and then trying it again. And it's like, don't worry, you'll get plenty of experience. You'll have opportunities to try this out and learn about yourself, and then learn about how you might want to approach it differently or the same if it's something that is productive, how you might want to approach it the next time, and that's normal. That's what allows you to sustain in doing social change work with people, that which is the requirement mostly for doing social change work. It needs to be collaborative for that, for it to be effective. So yeah, it's been a great lens to be able to bring to some of our preparatory experiences, so that people don't like come to us quietly and be like, I think I might be experiencing conflict. Uh-oh. It's like, no, that's our work. It's cool. Yeah.
So this kind of brings a different question in here, that we've been thinking. We are going through we're kind of revising our first year pilot curriculum. And our kind of subcommittee has started to think a lot about preparing for resiliency. So we are sending students into high conflict by design, right? Again, we're like, we know it's not going to be comfortable, but there are times where you are more students, we community partners, we all need to be able to maintain that hope and connect to that bigger thing. And we're starting to kind of question, in a good way, kind of seek out, how do we help students kind of prepare to be resilient? Prepare, like when you are so in such a high stress situation, navigating conflict feels really, really, really hard. I'm going to give kind of a really weird example that I think I gave to about 100 students last year. And if they are listening to this, they're like, oh, it's about being a duck, or people I used to work with in a nonprofit. So we would have interns come in, and they would be helping, like starting on a helpline. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give you some advice, and it's going to sound really strange. And I was like, I need you to be a duck. And they were like, a what? I was like, okay, so in the moment, you are going to pick up a call for someone in high conflict, like they are about to be evicted. It's not about you. You are going to be kind of witnessing a high conflict. Your job is to be kind of a duck on top of that water. You are calm. You are there, right? Under the water, your feet may be kind of freaking out, like, this is my first day. I don't know what I'm doing, kind of that external calm. I was like, so we talked about that need at times. I was like, however, if you do not come and find a place to process that, to reflect, you cannot come back day after day and be a calm duck. You have to, you are not weak for needing self-care. There are people who have been doing this for 30 years who still have to figure out what that looks like for them. It's not because you're young or you don't know what you're doing. You have to design in that resiliency, self-care. Are you seeing kind of a push to that? Are there ways to do it? I guess, are there ways to do it in an academic setting? I wish someone had talked to me about that in an academic setting as well, versus, it's just feelings. But it feels like a core component to engaging in conflict work.
One place that we are trying to do this work, and again, we're 2 years in, so we're still learning, but we've introduced a new conflict transformation skills course into the curriculum at Middlebury. And the course is centered around 3 questions. What is conflict? Moving from that more kind of negative knee-jerk aversion to conflict to understanding it as either just neutral, part of the human experience, or a vehicle for social change. The second question is, who am I in a conflict situation? Who am I in conflict? If we are going to be instruments of change, if we are participants in conflicts in our different communities, we need to know ourselves, right? And then the third question is what skills and dispositions can I bring to transform conflict? And I think that the work is so interesting. It is absolutely an intellectual and a physical and an emotional exercise of answering that question, who am I in a conflict situation? So some things, I'll just name a few things that kind of come up as we talk about that. The first is helping people navigate the difference between being uncomfortable and being unsafe. I think that our sometimes knee-jerk aversion to conflict makes us feel like we are under attack, right? And we can have a somatic experience to conflict, right? My face flushes, my shoulders scrunch up, my heart starts racing. It could be, I mean, there are situations in which there is a lack of safety, but sometimes it is you are hearing an idea or a viewpoint or a value that is not your own, and that feels uncomfortable, right? The challenge of doing this is that it's hard for someone from the outside to tell you that you're safe, right? That a feeling of safety is something that you need to cultivate through some awareness, right? Are my instincts telling me right now that I need to run for the exit, or am I really struggling to manage this situation, but it is uncomfortable. It's not unsafe, right? And so we're talking about that a lot with our colleagues and our students, just bringing forward that self-check-in, right? Where am I in this? Talking about what our conflict styles are. I was a high school and college debater. There is a way in which kind of an adversarial us versus them form of argumentation can really lead to a really dynamic conversation for me, but it might lead my interlocutor to run away, right? That feels like an aggressive attack against them. And so understanding that how we engage in conflict situations varies across the different individuals. I do think that the other part of this, in kind of the who am I in conflict situation, is thinking about our own tolerance for risk. Complex social problems take patience and some comfort with uncertainty to navigate them, right? I don't understand why there is a housing crisis in Addison County. It is going to take me a number of days, weeks, and months to gather the information to understand that fully. And in the meantime, I'm going to have a lot of questions. It won't be wrapped up cleanly, right? So sitting with uncertainty, having the fortitude and the patience to invest in the work today, but having the self-care so that you can be patient to see the process through for the long term. That patience, that uncertainty requires us knowing that we may be trying new things along the way, and hopefully there'll be well-informed hypotheses about what might be transformative, not just best guess or what I want to do, right? They're collaborative endeavors. But it requires that we are willing to try new things with an understanding that the first thing doesn't always take, right, in terms of transformation. So talking about that also in terms of investing in that long-term process, decentering ourselves, right, that it's not about you, it's about working with these other people on this complex issue. So that's not an exhaustive list of all the things we talk about, but I think that your question of raising attention with ourselves and with our students to that question of who you are in a conflict situation and what is your capacity for discomfort, for patience, and for risk-taking is essential to this work.
I like the capacity, and I think capacity can change. And I think what we often want to model, and our community partners model really well, is, there were days where I was like, I don't have it today. Like this, I'm normally, I will walk straight into this conflict. I can patiently listen, I can do it, but knowing that it's okay to show up and be like, I can't do this one today, and having a team. And so it's not saying you always have the capacity or you never have the capacity, but doing that check-in and not having the hubris of like, I'm strong enough to do it any day, anytime. I will always be patient. Walking into that conflict is always the right choice. I really like that idea of capacity, but also that it can fluctuate. And some of our talks with practitioners are really interesting because they talk about their own fluctuating capacity. And I think it's really reassuring to students to be like, oh, you've been a death row attorney for 30 years and you think about this. It's normal. It's good. It's what I'm supposed to be doing rather than a flaw. I think that's.
Yeah, Jen, I love that example because I think there's the understand we can talk to students about like it's important to think about to do all the thinking part of it of like that's right, I know this takes a long time, that's right, I know I can know myself better, and then to get to have models of it I think is such a good learning experience. And this is for me too. I love being able to have folks that I can ask questions to, and so sometimes like we have a community connected learning class where students have an interview assignment where it's about, how did you come to this work, what keeps you in this work, when is it hard to stay in this work, how do you hold this work when it's hard, and like that sets of questions where the mentorship and relationship is built with some intention around knowing the students are going to be wrestling with some of these questions. Yeah, the relationship building and the intentional flavor towards mentorship when in community partnerships, like what an incredible resource and folks to learn from. So I'm glad that y'all are doing that in SHEP. And I'd say that's something that community connected experiential learning has strong potential in. So because it's hard to talk to just like the intergenerational aspect of mentoring that can happen in a community-based environment, I think is really powerful. I've certainly learned from that to be able to say, okay, somebody is stuck in this for the long haul. How and why, especially if things aren't feeling very hopeful. It's really nice to have that like heart-based connection with somebody where somebody can be, or for me, that where I can be vulnerable and say, I'm not sure, I'm not sure if this is, if I'm cut out for this, or what is it like when you've messed this up. Is so helpful. So the relationship piece, it's great to have peers to have those conversations with too, but to have like mentorship relationships, I think is also really special.
Yeah,
And, yeah, really important.
We're talking about kind of that like taking conflict into the community. And so Sarah, in your course, you're encouraging students to kind of develop this new understanding of conflict and to get these skills. And ultimately, these students are going to leave a classroom and kind of go out into the world. And a lot of the stuff we talked about, the collaborative earlier, K-12, they're a little bit more class or student based. Like, how do we expand access for like others to learn these as we are, it's not just students having conflict with students.
It's really interesting. The students who were in the pilot version of our conflict transformation skills course asked a question of, it feels a little uneven. It feels like I'm tricking or I'm manipulating someone if I have this new awareness of how to engage in conflict, right? But my partner in the conflict situation doesn't have that same level of awareness or skills or facilities. And we've been talking about, you have to start somewhere, right? That we're trying to slowly build out this capacity. And as an educational institution, Middlebury is starting with its students, right? But then in that spirit of partnership with our communities, in that mission orientation towards training, supporting effective global citizenship. We need to not just do this within the walls of our Middlebury institution. So we've been piloting ways to think about how we share this knowledge and build capacity within our communities outside of the college, kind of town gown episodes, or with our community partners. We had several community partners who were interested in auditing the conflict transformation skills course, and that's now happened, I think, in 3 different iterations of the course this year, and it's a win-win for everybody. The practitioners have an opportunity to have a reflection space, right? Many of them already have a lot of skills, but being reminded of the things that they may have known or may have known in one context, but not in another, I think has hopefully been very generative for our partners. And then for the students to understand that this is not an abstract school of thought that stays in the library, that this is about an orientation about how to be in the world. This is a compass that helps you navigate your organizations, your social structures, your relationships. So I think that creating those, as we build out this program at Middlebury, I think that this attention to working in that partnership in our communities, whether it's the experiential piece or it's with our study abroad sites, or it's with the families, the town that our students are living and relating to, this will be more effective if folks have more understanding, a shared understanding of that potential positive of conflict, right? Of the fact that conflict can be navigated in various ways. So it's a challenge, and it's an important one, so that we're not just keeping this in the classroom or in the dorm room, but bringing this awareness and skills to all of the communities that we work with.
Great. I have 2 kind of bigger questions. So kind of thinking through the people you work with, the things you've seen, kind of what you've seen work there. My first question is, when we've developed this curriculum, we talk about different types of conflicts. You have your data, your relationship, your interests, structural values. And it seems like a lot of our students are kind of more ready to have conflict with a summer roommate, or things that involve a little bit more resolution. Or it is the transformation and it's doing it in a positive way, but it is you're moving through it a little bit more. And we've really been finding a lot more struggling with these conflicts of values, where there is no in finish line, right? Like, sometimes people just value different things or have different viewpoints, and they don't necessarily agree on those. Have you seen any trainings or strategies to kind of help students kind of sit with or kind of work through not being able to work through, for lack of a better way to describe that, having to sit with it?
Yes. um, yeah. And I would say, looking at the world right now, this is not like our students and then everybody else. Is this hard for a very polarized experience, even just within our country, within among students on the values piece? Yes. I found in listening to students talk about what's been hard about those bigger conflicts that are like very much not resolution situations, but just like uncomfortable, not resolvable questions like you're asking about. I found that students they have the the hardest time when they feel like they are the only of something, or they don't want to become the only. So if they feel like they're in a group where everybody's agreeing about something, on the surface at least, and there's social consequences for deeply engaging with curiosity, to better understand what isn't, something that is different. I feel like that can be where things are really hard. And then, so if as a group, there's this like our identity is deeply connected to this value. So then how do I step outside of that to better understand others who have that? Or if everybody is like that, if there's a curiosity, it's just hard to pursue that curiosity when everybody you're hanging out with says you don't need to do that because we're in the right. And then the other piece I think is when if a student is the only person who feels differently, to actually want to reveal that and come out and not just pull away from a group that is so clearly misunderstanding who they are. Those are two situations where I feel like things have been, it's entrenched some of the either avoidance of conflict or awareness of some people that there's a conflict going on, and not others. So I'd say that's when, so where are my questions when I see that are, where are spaces where we can help students know that they have, that there are others who can talk with them through how they're not the only, or to be able to have reflective spaces, kind of outside of that groupthink, or outside of that help students connect individually with their curiosities, or if it's the case where they feel like they're the only, get them into a group of folks who can talk about that experience. So kind of mixing and matching that, like when is it helpful to have individual reflection, when is it helpful to have group reflection, is something that a question that I've been thinking about when I've seen the challenge of engaging with conflict in those two different kind of value tension spaces.
You said two words that I think have been in my mind as well. Curiosity. Like, you know, being curious helps us not oversimplify someone and define them by their one value,
Yeah.
or a huge portion of what we do and talk about with SHEP is honoring human dignity. And that also
Yeah.
means with our others working with us. And part of treating others with human dignity is acknowledging that people are complex and not oversimplifying. Oh, you
Mhm.
agree to this. I can't. You were solely defined by that one value, and I have this other value. And I really like the idea of kind of encouraging curiosity that helps us not oversimplify the people we work with.
Mm.
It keeps it, yeah.
The values conflict question, as I understand it from the folks in the field that we've been learning from, I mean, this is the hardest one. So if we are struggling with it, we're not alone, right? I'm a scholar of human rights NGOs, and I think about what it means to invest in gender rights when working in collaboration with communities whose views on gender roles are very different, right, than they might be in the West. As one example, right, of why this is so very hard. You want to honor a spirit of partnership and the equal dignity of all persons, and you have a different framework for what that equal dignity looks like. So the values ones are unavoidable for all of us, and I think universally challenging for all of us. Kailee's done such a nice job of speaking to the individual level concerns that come up when we come in that space. Maybe two additional things I'd add that we have found are promising as we start this work. The first is that you want to match the problem with the right tool, right? As that you're kind of diagnosing what is at the heart of the matter and then trying to bring forward something that can address that. I'm trained in an approach called structured dialogue, and it is designed to help people move from us versus them binary conflict to listening to understand and bringing forward that curiosity that you talk about, Jen, right? When people have silenced one another across those different values, how do you create spaces and scaffolding for conversation so that they can ask questions of curiosity and try to listen to understand? So that's one tool that we have found helpful with students. A second approach that I think can be helpful is to think about what is your goal when you're trying to pursue large-scale social change. And if you are trying to build a coalition, then you will have to work with people who do not agree with you on all things. Loretta Ross talks about the difference between a cult and a social movement, right? A cult is where everyone thinks the same thing. A social movement is where people across different values share a goal and collaborate together. One piece of research that we brought to our students that we found really helpful in this way is a political strategy called deep canvassing. And Joshua Kalla is a political scientist at Yale who's been doing some of the assessment work on the efficacy of this strategy. Rather than just trying to mobilize people that already agree with you, you ask them what their values are. You listen for values that you can connect to. And the strategy involves listening to understand and telling stories to activate those values in different ways. We are all very complex. We hold many different values. We don't live our values consistently all of the time, right? And so how can the process of human connection, empathy, and listening allow us to reframe the values that we hold, right? So that we move from a space of mutually opposite value differences to ways in which we can understand our values differently that help us advance that shared goal. So structured dialogue as a tool, and then the possibility of persuasion by listening carefully and connecting with empathy, I think are things that resonate with our students who are deeply committed to social change, right? But are looking for strategies that they can use to advance that process.
I love that. I think that experience of cult versus social movement, you're going to work with people. If you have a goal and you want to make change, you can't only work with people who match you value for value. If you could even find someone who matches you value for value, assuming that. One last question. So last summer you had a summer convening on experiential learning and conflict transformation. And I legitimately still have a Post-it note from one of your speakers that talked about having to build the conflict muscle, that this was something you had to grow. And so as we are preparing to send students to these high conflict internships, and we think of the classroom as a way to prepare them academically, out there doing good work, whether in a classroom or co-curricular space, to kind of start building those muscles of conflict. Like, what does that look like well before you put someone in an 8-week intensive anti-poverty frontline internship? Like, are there people putting it in math classes and computer science? What does that look like really early on?
We have been, well, we try to meet people where they are. And so which analogy we choose depends on who we're talking to. But if we're talking to some athletes, we might say, if you want to get ready for the big game, you've got to do the practice, right? If we're here at Middlebury, where we have a lot of language instruction, we might say, we're not going to send you to France without practicing some French before you go. These are muscles that can get stronger with practice. One example of that, and perhaps what you're referring to, is practices of building critical self-awareness. So one of our speakers last summer was Beth Barilla, who talked about mindfulness as a tool for building that critical self-awareness. We can get better at being mindful of where we are in a conflict situation, right? A quick check-in to realize I'm running hot right now. I might need to step away and just name that for my interlocutor, right? This conversation is important to me. And I might need to take a break if that's okay, because I want to make sure that I'm intentional as we're talking about this. So just one small example, but we do have faculty and staff who are trying to expand these in curricular and co-curricular spaces. They are muscles that will atrophy if we neglect them, but that can get stronger with practice.
Yeah, I think these are muscles we have to keep working on. And I think the atrophy as well is it's not just you build it once. I think that's being surrounded by people who think differently and kind of keeping that up and pushing ourselves to think big picture and reflection is kind of that lifelong learning. Well, thank you so much for being here today and joining me to talk about this. I feel like we could talk forever. I am excited to kind of maybe check in after we do another year of this. I feel like the first year we were like, okay, what is conflict transformation? And now we're getting those feedback from students about kind of where we can dig in a little bit more. We've loved being able to partner with you and do the work, and we're looking forward to doing it for a few more years. Thank you.